Hi. So you're here to talk about knitting, which is good because I am here to talk about knitting as well. Let me guess. You've either purchased the yarn and have everything that you need to start a knitting hobby, but you just haven't started knitting. Or you know that you want to start knitting, but you have really no idea where to get started. And so if either one of those people are you, you're in the right place because I am Kylie. I love to knit and I want to be the person to help you to create um, really like joy and peace through a knitting practice. So let's go ahead and dive in and talk about your knitting practice. So again, my name is Kylie, and let me tell you, I started knitting maybe 20 years ago. It was a long time ago. So I've been knitting for about 20 years. And I started because a friend of mine said, girl, you just have too much energy. You need to relax. You need to bring it down, calm down. And so she literally sat on a bench and she taught me how to knit. And it has been just the greatest joy. And I think that if you're in the market for a hobby, your hobby should be knitting. And I'm going to tell you why. And I'm going to also invite you to join a very special community. So please hang around to the end of the video. And let's go ahead and jump in. So again, I'm Kylie, and this is our tight-knit community. And that is simply a place for women to come together, to heal, to create, to bond through the transformative power of knitting and community. If that sounds like something you're into, I would love it if you would subscribe to the channel and come hang out with us. So let's talk about knitting. That's why we're here. First, I want to say for me, knitting is all about the yarn. There is something that is so therapeutic about having the yarn in my hands, about feeling the texture, seeing the colors. I absolutely adore it. It is the best part of knitting, in my opinion. Some folks may be interested in knitting to as a side hustle, which is cool. That's totally cool. Other people are interested in knitting to make their own clothes, also pretty dope. Right now, I'm kind of just knitting because I like the way things feel in my hands. But there's space for everybody here, and so we're all just gonna kind of get in where we fit in, but we will be together in this practice of knitting. So let's jump into how you can unlock the joy of knitting in 4 relatively easy steps. Step number 1 is you need a pattern. So I like to start with the end in mind because it helps to keep me focused on what it is that I'm doing. So if you think about trying to do a puzzle and you don't know what the picture looks like, that's no bueno. That's no good. So we're not going to do that. So we need a pattern. The other reason we need a pattern is because as you're knitting, you will have a chance to see your mistakes. And good knitters make mistakes. We all make mistakes, and that's how we learn how to knit. So sometimes it is kind of comical to see the pattern that you've made versus what you were supposed to make. It provides a little bit of comic relief, which is just so important. So I've suggested an easy pattern for you to get started with. It's in the description. And do yourself a favor, just start with that one. It's simple and it's going to get you out the door on your knitting practice. So step 1, pattern. Step 2, supplies. We need supplies. I want to say thank you to Lena Norms, whose video, Knitting Supplies You Don't Need, I thought was right on target, right? Double tap that because there's a ton of stuff that you don't need yet. You will need it, but you don't need it yet. What you do need to start a knitting practice are 3 things. Number 1, you need some yarn, obviously. Number 2, you're going to need some knitting needles. And number 3, you're going to need a tapestry hook, which I can't find mine. Go figure. And you'll learn about that later, but for right now, just know that you will need it. So I want to talk a little bit about the yarn because the yarn is a little bit tricky. So first of all, there is like a dissertation's worth of material about yarn, and I have a link in the description that goes through a lot of stuff about yarn that you don't need to know right now. Just for right now, trust me that there's lots to know about yarn. So okay. So back to the back to the yarn. There's two basic different kinds of yarn that we need to talk about as it pertains to knitting, right? So the first kind of yarn is wool or some other natural fiber, and this is merino wool. It's not the softest, but look at the color. It's amazing, and it does feel really good. So there's natural fiber wool yarn. The other kind of yarn is acrylic or some like blend of acrylic and sometimes a little bit of wool, but mostly acrylic. So this yarn is acrylic wool, 10% wool, holla, and rayon. So mostly synthetic fiber, all natural fiber. All yarn is either natural or some sort of acrylic or blend of a bunch of stuff that's over here. So that's important because the price difference is going to matter, and also because the feel of the yarn in your hands and the way that it knits up is going to feel differently if it's a natural fiber versus an acrylic fiber. There's no judgment. It's about money, so do what you can. If you're able to splurge on natural yarn for your first project, I would do it. If you can't, don't worry about it. I do have some yarns that I like the way they feel, even though they're acrylic. But if you can, then it would be great to get a natural yarn. So let's talk about this splurge. There's two different places that you can get yarn. You can get yarn from a yarn store, which is my favorite place to get yarn. They're usually very cute, very quaint, wonderful little community yarn stores. Or you can go to big box stores. So you can go to Michael's, AC Moore, Joann's, Hobby Lobby, which, I mean, if that's your option, then they have yarn. But the difference in price is going to be kind of substantial. So if you go to a big box store and get, for example, this skein of yarn will probably cost you about $8.99. If you have a coupon, then you're going to be doing even better. But you might not have a coupon, or the cashier might not be trying to be friendly about your expired coupon. Y'all know how that goes sometimes. But if you have the coupon, let's say that you have a coupon, then this is going to cost you $9 minus your coupon, but $9. And then for two skeins, it's going to cost you $18 to knit something with the acrylic yarn. This yarn, which I got somewhere, I think in Brazil, so I don't even know how much it costs in US dollars. But let's say that in a yarn store, this yarn costs $22 a skein, and you need two skeins. So now you see we have a $16 project versus a $44 project. If you can swing the $44 project, do it. Okay? If you can't, don't worry about it. So that's what I wanted to say about yarn. The bottom line is that the yarn literally should make you do this. Like, just close your eyes and dream of it. It should be so soft, and it should, like, the color or the color gradation should just make you stop in your steps. And if it doesn't, that's not the yarn for you. So how do you choose the yarn? Let's say we're going to go into a local yarn store because you want the full yarn experience. You're going to go into the yarn store. You're going to say, hi, my name is Kylie, and I'd like to learn how to knit. I need some yarn. And they're going to point you in the direction of probably some yarn that's like not too chunky and not too thin. Your yarn you're looking for is like not thinner than spaghetti, but not thicker than like a Sharpie. So you're going to go in, you're going to ask for some yarn, they're going to point you in the direction, and you're just going to go and you're just going to feel it. And you're going to find yarn that you like the way that it feels and that you like the way that it looks. That's it. That's how you're picking your yarn. Get it? They're going to wind it up for you. You'll be on your way. Yarn. Done. Okay, next we need needles. You need needles to knit. Needles come in 3 different materials. They come in plastic, they come in wood, they come in metal. We don't do plastic needles. We just don't do it. We ain't doing plastic needles, so just let those go. So these are wooden needles. These are my favorite wooden needles. These are Knitter's Pride wooden needles. And Knitter's Pride has all of these. Do you see like the color? You see the color of that? Knitter's Pride needles come in all these different color wood, which I adore. You also have metal needles, right? Right? So let me just say one quick thing about needles. I think that as someone who's starting, you should get wooden needles. I actually prefer to knit on wooden needles because I like the texture. Metal needles are for people who are very fast and they're a little slippery. So what I like to say is like, think about these two different textures with your hands. So think about writing on a whiteboard with a dry erase marker, how smooth that is, versus writing on like construction paper with a Sharpie. Sharpie mention number 2. I love Sharpies. So, but can you think about the difference in how that feels? That's kind of how it feels to knit on wooden needles versus on metal needles. I'm going to suggest the wooden needles. Go with your heart, go with your gut. Get yourself some needles, and that's what you need. One other note on needles, if whatever yarn you get, they're going to have a needle size on it. That's the size needle you need. The people at the yarn store will help you. You cannot buy needles from Michael's or a big box store. It's just, I think most of their needles are plastic. So you may need to get a needle from Amazon if you're not near a yarn store. Otherwise, please try to get to a yarn store. Okay. So now you have your pattern, you have your supplies, you have your yarn, you have your needles, and ask the lady at the yarn store for your tapestry hook. Now you need to know how to knit. You need to know how to knit. Okay, so knitting is actually really not so hard. Knitting is comprised of 4 parts. 1, casting on, and then there are 2 stitches in knitting. There is the knit stitch and the purl stitch. And if you know how to knit and you know how to purl, then you know how to knit. You see how that worked out? And then the third thing that you need to know how to do is bind off, which is when you take the yarn off of the needle. So casting on is when you put the yarn on the needle, and then you knit, purl, purl, purl. And then when you bind off is when you take the yarn off of the needle so that your scarf or your blanket or your hat or whatever can exist in the world. That's what you need to do. There are literally 1,700,032, literally. I didn't count, but I bet there's that many videos to teach you how to knit. And many of them are spectacular. I've included the links to 2 folks. One is RJ Knits and one is, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting her name right now and I just dropped my paper. One is RJ Knits and one is Eternity or something like that Knits. Anyway, I have the links in the description. I think that their channels and their knitting videos are superb, and I would recommend that you use those to help you to teach the steps to knitting, purling, casting on, binding off. Then you will know how to knit. So that's 3 steps, right? You have your pattern, you have your supplies, now you know how to knit. So then step 4, homegirl, you gotta get knitting. And that's where I come in. So knitting for me really is about community, right? It's something you do on your own, but it really is about being attached to other knitters across the world, but just in your community, in your town, in your country, on this planet. It's really about community. And when you think about knitting, like the act of knitting is also about community, right? Little stitches that come together to create something beautiful out of nothing, right? Just kind of stitch by stitch, row by row, we go from a ball of yarn to a sweater or a scarf or a blanket. The act of it is actually very beautiful. And honestly, that's what we're trying to do, right? Each one of us, these little beautiful knitters coming together to create something out of nothing, to create this community out of a series of individual knitters, row by row, right? Pursuing this peace, pursuing joy, pursuing healing, pursuing community, stitch by stitch, row by row. That's what I'm here to do. That's what I'm trying to offer through our tight knit community. And if that sounds like your thing, then I would love it for you to subscribe to this channel and to turn on notifications so that you are able to come back and share your practice and knit with us as we go through this journey. So I will be here every Wednesday at 8 o'clock Eastern Time to knit. I hope that you will join me. I hope that you will share this with other people in your life who have always been talking about knitting. Go grab your homegirls and say, yo, you know you've been talking about knitting for forever. Now here's your chance to knit. I will be here. I will be here with my tea. Sometimes I might have some wine. Whatever's in your cup, that's your business. But come with your yarn, come with your cup, and we're going to kind of get this knitting practice going. It'll be fun, right? It is a way for you to take some time for yourself. And I truly believe that knitting is one of the most promising ways to healing, to peace. It really is a path to the ultimate in self-care. And I absolutely adore it. So that's it from me today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for hanging out with me. Go get your stuff. Meet me back here on Wednesday so we can go ahead and get started knitting. Thank you. Bye.